Good morning, viewers. Good morning, listeners from here in Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, and then to our members and members of the public around the world. You are welcome to the sixth episode of CITN, TAXATION and You. Today, we have a very special guest in the studio, someone that is a Nigerian brand, well known in Nigeria and beyond and around the world. So we'll be dealing with the title, Analyzing the Future Impacts of the 2023 Appropriation Act on Nigerians, analyzing the future impacts of 2023 Appropriation Act on Nigeria. And to me, we need to discuss this topic and do the analysis and the impact of how this budget recently signed into law 2 days ago touch on Nigerians is Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Africa Tax Leader, PwC. Mr. Oyedele, welcome to our program.
Thank you, my brother. It's a pleasure to be on the program.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So we're just going to go straight to the issue we have at hand. I call him my dean. So when I hear him say my dean, it's a way back. It's a journey way back. So my dean, in simple terms, like I said, this program is for everyone. It's not just about the technicality about taxation. We want to connect with every single Nigerian at every point. So this budget was signed into law about 2 days ago on Tuesday.
Yes.
Or so. What are the major highlights? What are the major direction? What is the needs for a typical Nigerian? If you want to share with us, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. So you're right. So the budget was signed into law 2 days ago. A little bit of departure from the tradition of making sure it was signed by 31st of December, so that it could commence on the 1st of January. But it was still okay, just a couple of days. So some of the highlights, first and foremost, is to remind people that the focus of government is to say, this budget is to look at transition and then fiscal consolidation, right? That's the broad direction of government. What does that mean? Transition, because we expect there will be a new government from May 29 this year. So you move from one government to another. So how can you ensure that these budgets prepares the ground for the next government? Fiscal consolidation is, I have a bit of issue with it, because what it means is you want to reduce deficits, right? And then build on the progress you have made around revenue. But the deficit is going up. So not to be too technical about it, that's the direction of government. Now, you would also, recall that the finance bill also accompany as a supporting document for the budget. It hasn't been signed yet, but that one has objectives around fiscal equity, which means if you are doing the same transaction as me, under similar situation, your tax should not be more than mine should not be more than yours. Tax equity, yes. We have the climate change. Government says, let's take care of our environment. Yeah, on paper, it looks good. The question is how you do it. There's another one around incentives, reform. Government says, maybe we are wasting a lot of money. And I think that's, in principle, nobody can disagree with it. Why give away ₦1 for which you don't get enough benefit? We also then have revenue generation and tax administration. Now, if you take all these objectives of the finance bill, and the broad thematic area of the budget, and then look at the breakdown of the budget. So we are spending about almost 22 trillion naira is the size of the budget. The president sent about 20.7 trillion. The lawmakers added 1.3 to it and said, you need to spend more, which I still don't understand. But one thing that worries me is the size of the deficits. Deficit now simply means this is how much revenue you would generate compared to the amount of money you want to spend. The hole or the gap is so huge. That amount is about 12 trillion. It's actually more than the size of the entire budget of 2020, just 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So, but in terms of the priority of spending of government, number one heading is security for maybe obvious reasons. So defense is about 1.25 trillion, and then you have police is about 800, put together over 2 trillion on security, followed by health, the health sector, followed by education, And there's also a provision for humanitarian emergency needs. So maybe what I'll say to the ordinary Nigerian is this budget looks okay. I'll not say it's the most exciting budget I've seen, but it looks okay in terms of where we find ourselves and in terms of the priorities of government. But what will really make a difference is how that budget is implemented. You know, budget is just a plan of what you want to do. It doesn't mean that you do it. If we handle security very well, and we see significant improvements in the security of property and lives in Nigeria, that alone means more investment will come. Nigerians will be at peace to move around.
Farmers can go to the farm.
They can go to the farm. The prices of goods can come down. Small businesses can thrive. They can create employment. Government can even get more taxes from VAT as people earn more income and they spend, right? So, and then healthcare, hopefully, you know, this multidimensional poverty index, you know, our people are really poor, essentially because of lack of access to education, healthcare is there, and then living standard. So I see some of those areas are now included in the budget, and we hope that it should be implemented in a way that would affect the lives of ordinary people on the streets.
Wow, thank you, Madin, the way you simplified it. Now, looking at, is that something you can tell our viewers and listeners from the implementation of last year's budget, 2022?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. The 2022 budget was a little bit unusual. So first, we had the budget that the president proposed. The lawmakers did their stuff, right? And then down the line, the executive said, no, let's revise the budget. So I kept saying to myself, in the constitution, there's nothing called revised budget. They're supposed to have a supplementary budget, right? But they did a revised budget. It was approved.
A whole revision of
everything. And then a few days to the end of 2022, they then submitted a supplementary budget. So 2022 now, if you want to look at implementation, you need to be looking like 3 or 4 documents. But overall, and the finance minister made a presentation of the breakdown yesterday. So we see that revenue in terms of non-oil has performed better than government expected, but not able to cover the shortfall in terms of oil revenue shortfall, right? Overall, deficit has increased. The amount that government has spent on infrastructure has underperformed what they plan to do. The amount that government has spent on servicing our debt, the borrowing that we, you know, things we borrowed in the past, exceeded what government planned to do. So overall, the budget for 2022 has not been implemented in a way that will have the maximum impact on the people, as well as the business environment. But I'm not blaming government like, you know, 100%. There are things they could have done better. Some of it is around efficiency and priority of spending. You know, there was a time there was a lot of conversation about Nigerian air. Another time they said they want to do refineries and they were borrowing $1.5 billion. Another time, so I think that a government that does not have sufficient money should prioritize what's most impactful on the people. At the state level, you know, sometimes we don't even remember to talk about them. You see, some of the states, you know, Ekiti State built an airport when they don't have primary schools, they don't have basic health centers, they don't have roads to the farm. And there's an airport in Akure that is just about 30 minutes. On a normal day, if you land at an airport in a city, to get to the city center, it's around 40 minutes. Why don't you fix the road to Akure? You know, and then some people are doing flyovers. They said one state governor, you know, did flyovers all over the place. It's not Rivers. We know Rivers is also doing their own. And there has never been traffic in that city center before.
Meaning there was no need for such.
There was no need, yes. So those priority of spending and efficiency of spending are the things that we could have done differently to make the 2022 budget had more impact than it did.
Thank you for that clarification. Now, my dear, if you look at the provision for capital spending, the current budget is about 4-point-something trillion. But maybe when you add, the one the National Assembly added,
it's about 6 currently. It's close to 30% now.
But if you look at compared to what we have for the recurrent, such amount of spending for capital development, so to say, Do you think is a right step towards meeting the intent of the National Development Plan? Government had a plan they come up with. So we are looking at 210 million people.
Yes.
Who have certain infrastructural need at various points, like you mentioned, healthcare, education, security, and all. So this 6 trillion or thereabouts, do you think is a step in the right direction towards pursuing that NDP, the National Development Plan?
Yeah, good question. Now, let me just try and explain it this way. So government has a way they have to spend in terms of what they must do first, what they must do next, and what they must do last.
Okay.
The number one thing that every government must do is to service their debts. Because we know that once a government defaults in their debt obligation, the whole economy can crash. We've seen that happen to Sri Lanka. We've seen it happen to Ghana recently. Before then, it happened to Zambia. It happened to Argentina. So you really don't want to get to the point where your government is defaulting. So in other words, whatever money government is able to make, they prioritize debt obligation. After that, they need to pay salaries. Recurrent comes next. So you can't tell civil servants to say, we are sorry, we are building road. So you need to then prioritize recurrent expenditure, salaries, overhead, travels, before you now go to capital expenditure. So unfortunately, the most important expenditure is the one that ranks the lowest in the order in which government must spend.
In our case.
In our case. The problem that creates is when government is now running a deficit budget where the money they have is not enough for the expenses they want to incur, what usually will suffer is that capital expenditure. Not only is it that 6 trillion is not sufficient for what we need, because there was a study that even government did it themselves during the ARGP. They had calculated the value of infrastructure in Nigeria as a ratio of GDP. And compare with other countries. Now, take South Africa. At that time, the value of infrastructure to GDP in South Africa was 85%. In Nigeria, it was 35%. So Nigeria needs somewhere in the region of $100 billion annually to even catch up. Yeah, to scale up. So this whole 6 trillion is not even enough. In fact, to fix roads alone, that 6 trillion is not enough. On top of that, government, based on the past trend, is unlikely to implement it 100%. So you then have to ask yourself, if we are in this very difficult situation, what can we do? My recommendation to government is always think about the infrastructure that we need. Identify the ones that are commercially viable. Electricity is commercially viable. Refining is commercially viable. Ports, whether it's seaport, whether it's airport, they are 1 million times commercially viable. Even rail is commercially viable. You can provide the rail tracks, let private sector put the coaches there and run it. So by the time you look at that, my list, and you continue like that, in my estimation, about 80% of what we need in infrastructure can be easily provided by the private sector. Government will provide the enabling environment. The infrastructure will be provided, right? Government would even collect taxes from the profit those people make from it. Now, the ones that are not commercially viable, like building school in a village, health center in one community, no private sector will go and do that unless they're doing CSR. Government should then focus on those ones. Yeah. So government focus for infrastructure should be the ones that are good for society, but are not commercially viable. And then set the policy for the private sector to drive the remaining infrastructure that we need. If you are flying out of Lagos now, chances are that you go to MMA2. It doesn't even occur to you that it's a private sector airport. You just know it's better than the old one.
True.
So that's what we need to do. Otherwise, I think we're going to be going around in circles for a long time, the way I'm looking at it, because when you combine the entire budget size of the federal government and all the 36 states plus the FCT, it's not even enough to address 10% of our infrastructure need. In fact, we always talk about tax to GDP ratio being very low. What we don't talk about is that the public expenditure to GDP ratio is also one of the lowest in the world. It's around 11%. So countries that are spending that kind of ratio are Haiti, Democratic Republic of Congo. The countries you don't want to be in the same class with them. You see, some of the happiest countries in the world, Finland, Denmark, the Nordic countries, you see them spending between 45 to 50% of GDP as public expenditure. In other words, why would people not be happy when government is taking care of everything?
They will do the riding bicycle, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. So that's the way I see it in terms of the capital expenditure budget for 2023.
Okay, now let's look at the personnel cost components of the capital expenditure. With being blunt about it, does it not look like the government is carrying too many people on its payroll?
I think yes, but I think it's a bigger problem than that. So on one hand, if Nigeria was working well, the way we all aspire and hope that the country would work, the head counts of civil servants we have today will be insufficient. You need more than that.
Okay, okay.
So what we have now is, in terms of relativity, i.e. the head count, the number of employees of government versus their productivity, means that it's bloated. We have too many people for what they're doing. In fact, by the way, I went to the immigration service yesterday, to go and renew my passport. So I did everything online. They gave me an appointment. I got there. Do you know, I was counting, I spent 5 hours. I got there 8:30 a.m. I left there by 1:30 p.m. 5 hours, exactly 5 hours. I went through 8 different processes. I couldn't believe that was happening in real life. It looked like Africa magic to me. So somebody will collect it and say they want to verify your NIN. Exactly. That's a queue. When you finish that, they give it back to you. Another person will open a file, put everything and give it back to you. I did another 3 different verifications, 3 different offices. And I said, and then you go and queue for capturing. There I spent 2 hours. When they finish doing all of that, they take your picture, you do fingerprints, you sign, and then take it to another office to go and submit it. And I said, is there somebody somewhere who is looking at simplification in Nigeria? The whole process, in my view, could have been done on one desk with a computer. Because all you just need to do is put in my identity, because they gave me a number once you register for it, and the number will tell you everything about me, whether the NIN is correct, whether it's this and that. You don't even need a physical file. Because when I filled the form, something went to your database. Why do I should just, anyway, long and short of it is, we have too many people in government, not because the head count is too many, it is because they're not productive enough. And I'll blame that on governments. Because if you see countries like Rwanda, you know, what Singapore did before now, and you see a few other countries where they have made significant improvements on ease of doing business, competitiveness, and simplification, you see the very, very intentional approach by the country's CEO. The number one reformer has to be the president of Nigeria. Otherwise, you know, PEBEC, Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, they invited me to watch a movie, a stage play on New Year's Day, where they had simplified all the reforms they've done. And I was really very impressed. But on one hand, I was saying to myself, these reforms that you're saying, people are not seeing on the ground. Not because you haven't done something, but because there's no political push from the top to force people who need to implement those changes to be able to do them, right? So I think that's the way I would put it. Ultimately, government has to find a way to ensure that the employees we have as civil servants are competent, they are enabled, give them resources to do their job, and more importantly, hold them to account for what they're doing. When I was looking at the breakdown of the personnel costs, I saw that the personnel cost for civil servants has increased from last year to this year. I think maybe about 10–15%. But then when I looked at the government-owned enterprises, their own increases is about 50%. So all animals are equal. Some are more equal than the others. So whether it's government-owned enterprises, whether it's the mainstream civil service, 3 things: competence, right? Including you need to train them, enable them, give them the right resources and training, and then hold them to account. I should not submit a file in a government ministry and they have to beg everybody like they're doing me a favor, sometimes you spend months. And this is business that cannot go ahead unless you get one permit or one approval here and there. And nobody is even asking, how come this file came into this office and is still here after 4 months, right? So these are the things we need to do, to be honest. We need to ensure that the civil service enables the economy to thrive.
Well, so many things our government really look into if you really want to make impact.
Indeed.
In this year and going forward.
Yeah.
I want us to look at the debt burden. The debt burden. If you look at the current deficit after the National Assembly's integration of what they think should be part of the budget and all of that, the current deficit is about 11 point something. We can call it 12 trillion. Budget deficit.
Yes.
So, and we know that this issue about securitizing the ways and means, the borrowing government that done over time from CBN, issuing treasury bills and bonds in place over 40 years, You see, the debt profile of Nigeria currently, I read is about 22 trillion for ways and means accumulation over time. About 22 trillion.
Yes.
And there's a report, I don't know how to consider it, that the debt the next government is going to inherit, right, is only going to be less than 50 trillion. How does this affect the common Nigerian, the wheelbarrow pusher, the petty hawker? Because these guys, they can't see this. They are not even, this doesn't,
it's not clicking for them.
It does not click. It makes no meaning.
Yeah.
But for the little vulcanizer out there, the pepper seller there, the word tree and all of that. So we refer to the bill in Nigeria. This debt burden. Is there a way? Is it just how it has to be? Yeah, because it seems to be cumulative.
Yes.
Under Abasanjo, we had the debt pardon and all of that.
Exactly.
They are here.
Yeah.
What was your take on the public debt?
Yeah, that's an important question. So government borrowing and government debt over the years, first we need to agree on what it is. So up until very recently, government only reported when they borrow by way of bonds, treasury bills, and Eurobond.
Okay.
They did not add ways and means. And for our audience, so ways and means is when the federal government needs money and cannot find revenue, either by taxes or by selling crude oil they can't find. And for whatever reason they cannot borrow, they go to the CBN and say, CBN, can you give us money to spend? So CBN finds that money essentially in two ways. Number one is what we call cash reserve ratio. What it means is when you take your money to the bank, the central bank, as their regulator says, when you collect money from your customers, you cannot do whatever you like with everything. You must come and give a percentage to me and keep it with me. They call it cash reserve ratio. So that amount is with the CBN and it's our money that we deposited with banks. Okay. So CBN can give that money to federal government to go and spend. Okay. Number two, CBN can just print the naira since they're the one printing it. It's not a good one. It's a terrible one if you don't put it under control. So that is what government over the past few years has accumulated that is now, in fact, it's now about 24 trillion naira. So the problem with that and how it affects the ordinary person is that the reason why you have the cash reserve ratio when CBN says don't do anything you like with all the money you collect from customers is they want to limit the liquidity in circulation because too much liquidity will cause inflation. When there's inflation, it means that what you bought yesterday is more expensive today and it will be more expensive tomorrow. If your salary and your income is not going up, you become poor every day more than the previous day. And your life becomes almost impossible, right? So many Nigerians are struggling to just find the food to put on their table. Now, the same government says inflation is too high and they are raising interest rates to mop up liquidity from the system. Okay. And then on the other hand, they're giving money to federal government to go and spend. So that is the biggest contradiction that is creating problem for Nigeria. That's why our inflation rate is high. The second reason is to do with foreign exchange because we haven't managed it well. And therefore, the parallel market, every time it goes up, everybody that is doing business, whether they get their dollar from CBN or whether they get from the parallel market, they have priced in the price of the parallel market into everything that they do. So we're already suffering it. And it's also adding to inflation because we import a lot of things into Nigeria. So at the end of the day, so if you record what government was recording before as their debts, and you add ways and means that we just explained now, there's a third leg. It's called domestic arrears. So this is when government says, OJ, I need you to help me construct this road for the good people of Nigeria. And the amount is 10 billion. And then you go and borrow money from bank, you do everything, you construct the road. The government certified the road is good, but they have refused to pay you. So in principle, that's a debt that government is owing. And the Minister for Works was alluding to it sometimes last year that the amount is growing. Now, when you put all of that together, it's huge for the size of our economy, particularly because our revenue is very low. The amount we are spending to service the debt became so high sometimes in 2022 that it was more than the entire revenue of the federal government. It was about 118% of government revenue. That is what scares me as a Nigerian, because I know that if you continue like that, the end is very predictable and it's not what we want for Nigeria. So we have to start taking steps to start reversing it. Now, there are countries, by the way, America has over $30 trillion debts. The debt of America is more than their GDP. But nobody cares. You know why nobody cares? Because when America borrows from the public or from anyone, they pay next to nothing. Either they're paying 1% or 1.2%. So in the affairs of things, and they make $6 trillion in revenue every year, all levels of government in the US combined. So the amount they use to service that debt is out of pocket. So nobody cares. They can't, exactly, that's the way to put it. They can deal with it. We are struggling, we can't deal with it. Now, I don't think any magic will happen between now and May 29. So which means most certainly the next government will inherit this heavy debt burden. What they do between day one and the end of 2023 will tell us whether we should be concerned about Nigeria for the next 4 years or whether we should keep hope alive.
Wow, that's serious. Thank you, my dean, for the way you have simplified of the discussion. I want to go to our audience to get their questions, commentaries, and contribution. Thank you, audience, for being with us. Our team, can we look at, so for our audience, please, if you want to ask question, make contribution, you may just you put up they use the icon, the palm icon, the raised palm, so that I can call on you to make your question, to ask a question or make your contribution. While waiting on that, Tim, can you keep us open up the comments? Let's see. Okay, someone asking, there from Semitokbe Fagbola, Mr. Tindwa Fagbola, is it possible for international organizations and foreign donor countries to place ban or ceiling on Nigeria excessive borrowings without commensurate results on such borrowing? As always asking, is there a way that probably want to help Nigeria? We are not giving them anything, we are not lending them. Is it possible?
Yeah, I know that person has that question from the angle of patriotism because they are concerned, right? They're wondering if we can't help ourselves, maybe other people can help us. Unfortunately, the answer is no. No country can tell another country how to run their government. What they can do is they can refuse to give us a loan.
When they come to you.
Yeah, so if you go to IMF, you go to the World Bank, they can say, we're not giving you, right? But then let me tell you why they cannot say they're not giving us. Nigeria is at least 200 million people. Some data say we're around 214, 210, but let's even say it's 200 million. If there's crisis in Nigeria, no country in the world will be spared. Nigerians will go everywhere and anywhere they can find. So you're going to have more problem with migration, which Europe, for example, can't cope with. They tend to be the one who suffer the most when there's a crisis in Africa.
True, they're nearby.
Yes. So in their own selfish but self-enlightened interests, they don't want Nigeria to collapse. So what that means is when they see that you are really struggling, they will give you the loan, and that's why they put conditionalities. Sometimes people blame them. Me, I don't blame them.
Okay.
So I'm saying when I give you the money, don't go and use it to buy private jets. See, our people are going to ask for a loan they go with private jet and motorcade, and the person that is giving them the loan enter the train to come for the meeting. Those things are not good enough, right? So no foreign country, just to be clear, can place a limit on us, but they can decide what loan they're going to give us and what they will not give us. And if they're giving us, they can spell out the conditionalities for those loans. I have to also mention that even though in these budgets, there's more focus on local borrowing, domestic borrowing, than foreign one. For obvious reasons, because the interest rate for foreign borrowing has gone up significantly. As they were raising interest rates in major countries, US, UK, Europe, what that means was to put your money in Nigeria, you needed more returns from Nigerian government because you consider Nigeria as a risky environment than, say, the US. You can buy US government bond and go to sleep and wake up anytime you like and the money will be there. If you put it in government bond in Nigeria, Euro bond, like they did in Ghana, and Ghana says, sorry, we can't pay you. You can't sleep with two eyes closed. You sleep and close only one eye. Use the second one to keep praying that the government does not get into trouble.
Okay, thank you, Madam. Okay, we have some members whose hands are raised. Let me start from, please, we need your name written so I can call you. Let me start with Mrs. Oluyemisi Shitu. You may unmute. Oluyemisi Shitu, you may unmute and then please just go straight to the point because we have a lot of people lined up to make comments or ask questions. So go ahead.
Good morning and thank you, Mr. Oyedele, the CITN and members that are on this meeting. Happy New Year. I'm just wondering, thank you for this medium, but I was wondering if there's nothing more than that professional bodies like CITN, ICANN, NBA can do to enlighten and sensitize the general public into appreciating the need for us to really ensure we go out there and choose responsible and capable leadership. And I'm throwing this up because, especially as the educated, I'll call us the main culprits why Nigeria is where we are. We have sat back for too long and left things that we should do undone. So I'm just wondering, because a lot of the things we're discussing here, the average market woman, the market man, the villager does not know. They don't understand when we talk ratios, when we talk GDP. What can we do to move out more beyond just sitting in our comfort zones to educate Nigerians and start having ourselves well represented in the politics of the country? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam. Yeah, my dear, over to you.
Yes, I like that question. Yeah, because we can keep analyzing.
Okay.
But if you don't carry the rest of the population along, you make zero impact. Okay. Because when it comes to, if you remember and remind yourself that 133 million people are multidimensionally poor in Nigeria, and about the ratio of illiterate adults in Nigeria is one of the highest in the world. I think it's close to 48%. So what that means is those guys, whether if you say come and queue for 5 hours to collect PVC, they'll be there because they're not doing anything else, right? You and I with our tie and grammar will say we cannot, right? When it's time for election, those guys will happily collect 2,000 naira and a loaf of bread and vote. So which means the decision about our lives and our future is determined not only by the middle class, in fact, maybe not by the middle class, but by the lower class. But the middle class are the ones who have the knowledge. But most times we're speaking to ourselves. Okay. You know, and I came up with this formula, which I'm doing personally, is to say, if every professional, every middle class person makes a commitment that I will speak to 10 people that trust me. Okay. Right? You know, because you are educated and the way it is in Nigeria is, even if you earn only 50,000 per month, there's at least like 5 people you are sponsoring. They have no choice but to trust you because they know that you have their best interests at heart. That's why you can part with your money. So like my mom visited me like last month and I just asked my mom, you know, simple conversation, who are you voting for? Why are you voting for? And I saw that mommy was going to do wrong voting. Without telling her who to vote for, I educated her And guess what? She was convinced 100% because my mom can't imagine my dear son telling me wrong information, right? Okay. So imagine one person makes a commitment, I will educate 10 people. My grandma, my uncle, my auntie, your mentees, my mentees. Do 10. What would do then? You multiply the impact of this knowledge. For many of them, if you say don't collect money, you are wasting your time. Say, even if they bring money and you collect, make sure that this is civil for the right person.
Okay.
Without that, this narrative will not change. Because my view is that, I've looked at the manifestos of the leading political parties. Many of them don't even understand the problems.
Okay.
So that you can see the prescription is trying to address headache when what you have is cancer.
Cancer, okay.
Right? It will not solve the problem. Yeah, it's a misalignment. At best, you get something that kills the pain for 3 hours and then it comes back stronger. You need fundamental solutions to Nigeria's problem. So I do think that the middle class, those of us on this call, can play a role. Professional bodies can play a role, not only in educating the public, which is I commend CITN for this program.
Thank you.
It's also playing a part. Submit stuff to government. If they are not responding, put it in the public space. Like the National Assembly did not do public hearing as far as I'm concerned, because Senate published on the 21st. They said the public hearing was 22nd, 24 hours. Before you read the bill, before you write the submission, before you send it to them, before you book flight to go to Abuja, if you are not based in Abuja, it was impossible. House of Reps said their own public hearing will be 13th of January. They turn around, pass a special resolution to override their rules, and they pass it without public hearing.
Wow.
I would expect professional bodies, CITN, MBA, ICANN, ANA, to speak up and say, this is not right. Right. So I'm not saying we are doing nothing, but I'm saying we can do more. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Let me go to Mr. Abdulgafar Balogun. Mr. Abdulgafar Balogun, if you are there, you may unmute and then go straight to your question or contribution. Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to Mr. Taiwo for the usual expositions. I just want to ask, Mr. Taiwo, if you were to be the next Minister of Finance, or probably President of Nigeria, what would you do differently to move this economy forward?
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, somebody said, why don't I contest? I said they won't vote for me. So because I think that our country and our people are not prepared for the hard truths.
Okay.
And I'm someone who is very blunt and very honest. I can't have something in my mind and tell you a different thing. But anyway, that's by the side. If I'm Nigeria's president, the first thing I will do, and some of it is you have to start with what I call the quick wins.
Okay.
Right? The first thing I will do is to set the example by my asset declaration. I'll do my asset declaration, I'll do my liability declaration, and I'll publish it. Every single person, that's my next step. So all the head of the agencies, members of the cabinet, from minister to this and that, every single person will be appointed based on merit. If you're already there as a civil servant and I don't think you're competent, by the way, they're going to do an assessment. I would just sit down in my office and assume you're competent or not. Get leading organization to do personality and leadership assessments.
Unbiased.
So, unbiased. And then they'll bring the report, right? So every report, you give me the top person, right? So if I'm asking for that, for every MDA, you give me the top person who is Yoruba, top person who is Igbo, top person who is Hausa,
okay,
right? Because it means that if I want the balance, I can skip the number 1 person and go to number 3. It's still good enough, right? So if you're already in the civil service like that and you're not good enough and you're senior, I'll give you compulsory retirement and give you good money to take care of yourself and your family. I have competent people. You know that I kept thinking about it. Each time I remember what Bubama Roy is doing with NDLA.
Yeah.
It's as if there was no NDLA before.
Yeah.
You know, once you have the right leader, it changes everything. So my job as Mr. President is I have business with each of those leaders of every MDA. For every minister, You won't go and be saying whatever you like. We'll sit down together. This is Project Nigeria. If you are in health, what must you do? How many wards in Nigeria are there no health centers?
Okay.
Right? You count it. What is the road in Nigeria? 133,000 kilometers. How many of them are paved? Where are they? Let's have a dashboard. So you can't go and do one bridge and Lagos Ibadan is there for 10 years and you use it to campaign every year, right? We can't run a country like that. Every of my ministers will have a mandate of what they must do that is clearly measurable.
Okay.
The next thing is accountability. You not say this and keep it to the fake or keep it to yourself. Every MDA must have a website. It must be updated on a daily basis. Put all the things you are trying to do there. Put your budget there. Every amount you spend, you must indicate it every 3 months. After 3 months, 1 month after your report is not out, I fire you. No questions, no answers. I just fire you. You know, the easiest job where you can fire someone and not feel bad is when you are the president. When the next person resumes, like now in Nigeria, we're saying revenue is not there. 63 MDAs are collecting revenues. Why is it not FRS collecting for Nigeria?
Okay,
so that you block the leakages. Exactly. Okay. So if I say don't collect revenue because you are not FRS, many of them are in court. Imagine the federal government says don't collect revenue. You say, but I must collect revenue. I have the audacity to go to court. Not only would I fire you, you'll be prosecuted. Once you have that coordination, the last thing I would do as a matter of urgency is for every MDA, right? Every government agency and ministry, their touch point with the people. My priority will be the Nigerian person, the Nigerian people. Let's give them back dignity. And what that means is every interaction you have with government will be measured from the point you start the process and the point that you get out. And the assessment of the head of every agency will be the worst case scenario is what I'll use to assess them. Right? You won't come to me and say, you've improved by 15%. I'm not interested. The last person who suffered the most, why did they take them 5 days?
Like your friends with the allowance.
Exactly. Unless you say to me that it was them, they didn't bring information and all of that. So there's a lot we can, if I'm finance minister, the priority will be how do we ensure coordination with monetary authority? So they said they are doing in Naira redesign, withdrawal limits. Those things have huge tax implications. And the finance minister said they didn't even tell me, right? And I've said before, before I can take any political appointment in Nigeria, I need at least 5 minutes with the president. If I cannot get it, I'll decline any appointment. That 5 minutes with the president can be by phone, it can be face-to-face. I will ask one question, Mr. President, would you allow me to do the job? I need you to say yes, because even you, I'll decline your request if it's not in the interest of the country. Without a doubt, I'll say, I'm sorry, Mr. President, I cannot do it. And I'll resign the next day and tell the whole world why I resigned, right? So whether you think about the debt, whether you think about revenue or expenditure efficiency, there's a lot more we can do. Why is it that in the budget, you have padding? They say it's not padding, but padding is what we know it to be because you added the stuff. You find 4 MDAs buying Toyota Corolla. And the price can be up to 3 times more in one place than the other. Exactly, same product. Those are easy things. Procurement, transparency, you know, and this is not reinventing the wheel. These are things that have been done in many countries that you can easily replicate. And once you do that, I guarantee you, within 1 year, Nigerians will see visible improvements in their lives on a day-to-day basis, whether it's the small business. For example, one of my ideas for small businesses is create a platform, both physical and online. Whatever is not on that online platform, because it's legislated, it's illegal. Anybody that does it should go to jail. You should not stop anyone on the road and say you are collecting levies that we don't know where you are paying it to. We harmonize all their taxes. They'll pay only 1 or 2 taxes online, easy. If they don't have access to online, there'll be an office close to them, right? So there's a lot we can do in Nigeria, and I don't want to sound theoretical, but some of these, and by the way, I've shared some of these ideas with government, but if you're not the one making the decision, You can advise and they make the decisions.
No, because you've been on PEBEC,
yes.
You've been on the vape thing, the voix stuff, you've been on all of this, but like you said, you make your input, it's subject to their accepting and
exactly.
Thank you, my dear, for that very elaborate response to the question asked. So we'll go over to Mr. Ado Mohammed. Mr. Ado Mohammed, if you are there, may you unmute and speak. Mr. Ado Mohammed. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, mine is what would be Mr. Tayo's advice on the National Assembly on the issue of restructuring of the ways and means advances? Looking at even this year's budget, I think it is going to be inevitable for government to still go back for the same ways and means. And now the president is asking the National Assembly to like restructure the ways and means advances, I think up to a tenure of about 40 years. What would be the advice of Mr. Tayo to the National Assembly on this critical decision? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So on one hand, I think that the National Assembly does not understand ways and means. Because I listened to them, I watched their plenary, and they were saying they did not authorize the spending. So ways and means is not the spending, it is the borrowing. So every year you already approve a budget that has a deficit. What you already said to government is, we hereby approve that you can spend more money than you are going to make. So when government cannot raise bonds or treasury bills or euro bond and they go to CBN, that is not spending, that is borrowing to finance the budget that you already approved. That's a fundamental misunderstanding. So the National Assembly needs a bit more education about ways and means. The second thing is that the federal government says they want to securitize it. What they mean by that is this money that we have taken from central bank, let's go and borrow money from the public by way of bond for 40 years and use the money to pay CBN back. So that instead of owing CBN, we are owing the public. Now, the difference it makes is that by owing the public instead of the CBN, you mop up money from circulation and inflation should go down. Number two is that the federal government says they are paying MPR plus 3%. MPR now is 16.5% in interest to CBN.
That's 2.5.
Yes. Wow. That if they securitize it for 40 years, they will pay only 9%. Although I think that government is not telling us the full story because, one question I put yesterday when the minister was having the presentation, because I wasn't there physically, I was at the immigration office trying to do my, so I joined online, so I put a message online, is that, okay, so this interest that are paying to central bank, who owns CBN, right? You say your cost is going to increase by 1.2 trillion if they don't securitize it, but you own the CBN, so whatever you pay to the CBN, I expect should also come back to the federal government as income. So it's really in and out. Yeah. But in a way, I think what the National Assembly needs to do is to understand ways and means, ask more questions, and if they need to amend the law to say that these ways and means, because it's already there, they're just not complying with it. It's not meant to exceed 5% of your previous year's revenue. So if that 5% is not realistic, National Assembly can say maybe it needs to be 7, 8, 9, or 10%. But whatever it needs to be, they need to put consequences that can actually mean impeachment for whoever exceeded, because there's no point, enacting laws that people just ignore and do different things. So in my view, my brother, I think that's what the National Assembly needs to do.
Well, thank you, sir. We'll go to Mr. The name there is Farm, but the Farm is not a formal name. That's why I've been skeptical of calling that name. So FARM, Farm, can you unmute and give us a full name, then make your contribution or ask your questions? Mr. Farm, if you are there, may you please let us have your formal name and then make your input. Okay, let's hop over to Mr. Shehu Abdullahi. Mr. Shehu Abdullahi, if you are there, you may unmute and speak. Thank you.
Hello.
We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. Please, the presenter, I've not heard anything about the petroleum subsidy removal, which I know will have very significant impact in the budget presented just last couple of days ago. I want to know how would the removal will have impacts. in the Nigerian economy? Will it have impact, the removal or not removal? How will it affect the Nigerians?
Okay, excellent question. Thanks for asking that question. So if you remove fuel subsidy, it will have an impact on Nigerians. If you don't remove it, it will have a bigger negative impact on Nigerians. That's the way to summarize it before I explain. So in this 2023 budget, there's a provision of about 3.2 trillion or 3.6 for 6 months. Yes, because this government, in my view, was kicking the can down the road. I think they should have done it. They should not leave it for a new government to come and deal with it, but it is what it is. Now, I have to be honest with you, because I spent the past, it's now 10 years. I started in 2013, working on fuel subsidy in Nigeria. And I've shared my views with various governments, from Jonathan and Okonjo-Iweala to subsequent administration to this current one a couple of times. And my conclusion is that there's a significant component of fraud, massive corruption inside that fuel subsidy. Because sometimes in 2021, because of COVID, the price of crude oil went down so low that the market price of petrol was even lower than the regulated price. So which means subsidy was zero. In fact, there was a time government reduced the price by 10 naira. At that point, our consumption went down to around 33 million liters per day. Today, the figures range from 60 to 90 million liters per day. Where are these people in there? Are they drinking petrol, my brother? Are they drinking it?
Okay.
So
something is shady.
Yes. Okay. So if you try and clean it up, first you see the size of the subsidy is much smaller. Number two thing you have to do is to then identify who needs the subsidy and at what point should it be paid. Today, the subsidy point is importation. Before, all manners of people were importing petrol, right? At some point, you didn't need to import petrol. You just need to get customs to stamp your papers and you go and collect subsidy. Or you can import the petrol and take it back and sell in Benin Republic. So they say, okay, NNPC only you should be importing. Even NNPC too, we can't trust them to be doing things efficiently. So when you clean up that process, okay, right, and then identify, I'm saying to myself, why is it that the subsidy on petrol is at the importation and not at the pump? Why don't I subsidize at the pump?
At point of consumption.
Yes, and then identify that if you are Taiwo Oyedele or you are OJ, we are sorry, sir, you're not entitled to this subsidy. And only subsidize shared passenger transportation powered by petrol. That's the simple formula.
Okay.
So as part of the vehicle license or the driver license, just put a shift. And by the way, boats have something like that. These boats, so they have a card, like I used to buy for. So when you drive your danfo there, you see your guy want to buy 10 liters, you pay 165, you give them the card, they collect the balance from it. In fact, me and you who are not paying the subsidy, you are not enjoying the subsidy, should pay the subsidy for the other people.
Okay. And
everything should go straight to an account at the central bank where those guys draw from with their own card. And it can be audited.
Okay.
So that becomes a transition from where we are now to when we finally remove the first subsidy. And I've also said to government that one of the problems we have with fuel subsidy is anytime we want to remove it, we create scarcity. Scarcity itself, we make prices to go up. There's no way to discount it, right? And now we're dealing with scarcity and some people are buying 250, 300. We're suffering and we're still paying the subsidy. So, and I've said, government can remove the subsidy by phasing it out. You can do 1 naira per day until you get to the market price. Nobody will hoard petrol because you're increasing it by 1 naira tomorrow because they need to run their business. But once they know you're going to increase it from 165 to 300, they will not sell again. We'll queue for 5 hours. We'll be begging them. And when you find the fuel in jerry can along the road, prices will go up.
Wow. Thank you, my dear. It's been very exciting, so interesting. Sorry, our time is up. It's tight for us. Well, I want to take one more, but our time is fast spent. Let me take one of the comments written. Someone is asking, is that Akim? Okay. Akim says, how should one rationalize the federal government plans to borrow 7 trillion in 2023 I think that's 11 trillion now, 2023, and then not be able to use the loan to boost the economy to generate increased tax revenue to service the cost of borrowing. I don't know.
It's more than 7. 7 is what they want to do from the domestic market.
Yeah.
You still have the one from multilateral agencies, you have Eurobond.
Yeah.
So altogether about 11 trillion. The reason why we are not seeing the impact is about 6 point something out of that is to go and service the debt we already borrowed previously. And then you have a significant portion of it that is going into non-productive spending, in my view, like bloated overheads, some of the salaries that you cannot explain. Government increased the ESTA code just last year. And I said, why are you even giving ESTA code? Give them corporate cards that they can spend and you can track it and audit it. So my brother, the reason why we may not see the results on the economy is because we're not spending wisely enough.
Wow, it is so nice. Thank you, my dean, my double dean, Mr. Tawo, for coming. We've been trying to get you, and you're here. And it's like the time is there enough, but we have to stop. It's 1 hour program. We wish we will go on and on. Thank you for being with us. We want to thank all members of our audience for joining us. Those who are streaming live on YouTube, those who joined through Zoom, and those listening to us through other platforms. My president, a parting word for the federal government, because this budget is about us, the Nigerians. A parting word, what in coincides on what do you have for the federal government, or rather to the success of this 2023 budget?
Yeah, so my message is both for the federal government and also the state government.
Okay.
And in fact, the local government. Local government, we don't even know what they are doing, so we can't even analyze it. They should even start by presenting their budget online and how they spend it. Yes. And then for the states, they should please, and federal government, they should please remember that at the end of the day, their role is a position of trust. 200+ million Nigerians, trust them. It's a lifetime privilege. Only less than 0.1% of Nigerians will have the opportunities that they have. So they need to bear that in mind in making decisions so that they don't place political considerations above economic rationality. Because if you do that either because you want to win the next election or because you are desperate to hand over to your friends so that they don't dig out the things you buried, you end up putting all of us into trouble. Let's remember, at the end of the day, power is transient, but your legacy is going to be forever. What is it that you're going to do for the Nigerian people that will remember you to say, yes, you did this for us within your ability? So please, our politicians, remember, you cannot be successful in a country of a failure. So let's make Nigeria a better place for all of us.
Wow, thank you, Mike. That's the perfect way to wrap it up. So I want to thank you all once again for joining us. So this is the 6th episode. 7th episode comes up on the 1st Thursday of February 2023. I thank my team. There's so many of them we can see back end there doing the modulation, doing the following up, or muting so that others can speak, muting as necessary, and coordinating the text platform. Thank you, Secretariat. Thank you, the cameraman and the rest of the team. Thank you so much. Let's have a great work day and a successful January 2023. Thank you. Bye-bye.